there's a paradox that very tiny electromagnetic fields can have healing effects. They can stimulate the repair of bone, for example. But if the frequency is wrong, they can have harmful effects. Why is that? What's going on there? It's the voltage-gated calcium channels. These are channels on the surface of every cell that regulate what the cell is doing. They're very important regulatory molecules. And they are normally signaled by hormones and by light coming from hormones. This is not the conventional way of looking at it, but hormones do not do what they're supposed to do. Hormones are supposed to diffuse from a place where they're secreted, diffuse randomly. I call it the drunken sailor model. The cell secretes a hormone and it diffuses randomly. It's like the sailor who just got off the boat and is trying to find the pub and has found one and now is trying to find the next one. That can't work, and I'll explain why that is. So our conventional models of how the body is regulated are wrong. In fact, I've learned many things in my career. It started about 1980. I began looking at alternative medicine. I had to learn physiology, and I had to relearn physiology because much of what's in the physiology books is wrong, out of date, very out of date. It takes a long time for new information to get into medicine, and that's a big problem. And there's resistance to new information. Try to find a medical book on physiological regulation. Nobody talks about it. It's probably the most important aspect of medicine is regulation. All diseases and disorders occur because the body isn't regulating properly. The body isn't doing what it knows how to do for some reason. This should be studied. It isn't studied. Very, very few investigations. So Martin Pall found that these regulatory channels on cell membranes that regulate all sorts of processes are extremely sensitive. This has to be one of the classic statements in all of science. He said, the information was hiding in plain sight, but nobody looked. And the information that he found and put together is dozens of studies that show that a signal, a very tiny signal, can activate a cell at a very low level of energy, very, very low level of energy. And so what happens when we have this electromagnetic pollution is that the cellular regulatory processes get all confused and all kinds of weird symptoms are produced. Something that's very important I have to tell you about, which is earthing or grounding, grounding yourself. Very important, very easy to do. Everybody needs to do it. It's so simple, it's ridiculous. If you don't do it, you're making a big mistake. Every study we have done has shown that connecting to the earth with your bare skin enhances your physiology, brings things into balance. And what is going on is when you're in contact with the earth, you get electrons from the earth. And that's really important. So when you get grounded, electrons from the earth flood into the body, and the red blood cells get charged on their surfaces and they repel each other. So there's no clumping. And we've shown this with careful studies. And this makes it much easier for the blood to be circulated and is a great relief for all kinds of cardiovascular diseases. No side effects. Do it. It's It's great. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. I suggest your heart is the center of the universe. To access the core of the universe, your heart will help you. The heart is not a pump. The heart is not a thing. Okay, two complementary perspectives on the heart. The heart is a mechanical pump that circulates the blood. That's one perspective. The other perspective, the heart is a field of energy extending throughout the universe. It extends everywhere. I'm going to tell you that what pumps the blood is light. Your heart is the center of the universe. So this started in 1920 when Rudolf Steiner lectured to physicians that the heart is not a pump. They, of course, knew that he was crazy. He had the idea that the blood was propelled with its own biological momentum. What does that mean? What could that be? And this can be seen in the embryo. And this was done in 1932. A Harvard embryologist was studying the development of the circulatory system in a chick embryo. And what this fellow noticed, that the blood was flowing before the heart was beating. Yeah. And he didn't realize that what he was observing was demolishing the theory on how the blood circulates. The blood was circulating without the heart pumping. So if the heart doesn't pump the blood, what does? And the answer is light pumps the blood. And here's how we know this. This is from the work of Gerald Pollack. What he discovered is there's a kind of water that is close to surfaces, which he calls exclusion, EZ water, exclusion zone water. And what he means by that is the water next to a surface, next to a hydrophilic surface with charge plus minus with charges, the water becomes very highly ordered like a crystal. And there are no dissolved substances in it. If you apply a dye, the dye can't get in there. The dye is excluded from this zone. And it extends far away from, for example, the surface of a cell. This is fantastic. Fantastic discovery. Here's the exclusion zone. And light increases the exclusion zone. Light makes it bigger. And the spectrum, he did check different frequencies. Infrared is the best frequency for expanding the exclusion zone. Here it is. This is the gel tube. Here's the water with the microspheres, and they just keep going through it like it was a pump. What was making this happen? And it turned out to be light. Work is being done. Water is moving through the hollow tube. Energy is required. Energy is being absorbed somehow. Water transduces light energy into the movement of the particles through the tube. Well, it turns out infrared light is everywhere. If you turn out the lights and could look in this room with all the lights turned off, with an infrared camera, you would see everything is glowing. Everything above absolute zero temperature is emitting infrared light. People are emitting infrared light. So part of what this is about today is demystifying the biofield, fields of light. And this was a big subject when I started working on energy medicine. How is it that when I bring my hand close to a person, I can affect their physiology from a distance? I don't even have to touch them. Most people think that their body ends at the surface of their skin, and it doesn't. Our bodies extend indefinitely into space. Your first heartbeat is still out there traveling through space. The heart emits electromagnetic fields. It produces an electric field, a magnetic field, and an electromagnetic field traveling at the speed of light. Einthoven recorded electricity from the heart using the sensitive galvanometer. He got the Nobel Prize. So the heart, the electrocardiogram, other organs, the brain produces a magnetic field measured by German scientist Berger, 1929. The myogram, every muscle contraction, produces an electric field. Anything that goes on in the body generates an electric field and also a magnetic field. So this is a SQUID superconducting quantum interference device. These are pickup coils. This is the Josephson junction. It connects to amplifiers, and it can be used to map the field of the body, the magnetic field of the body. And here's a modern magnetocardiograph, and this is a field that's mapped out using the magnetocardiogram. And this is the SQUID. The magnetic permeability, the magnetic fields go right through tissues, whereas the electric fields have to go through different layers of tissue to get to the skin surface. So this means that what you can detect with your hand, and lots of people, lots of therapists can feel.
Today with Glenn Ryan, who we've run into at the water conference in Bulgaria. We'd love to know a little bit about you and a little bit about your thoughts about consciousness and why it's important for us to address it.
Yes, well, that's an interesting question, and it's too bad it's not really covered in this conference because this is a conference about, hard scientists studying structuring of water. But I have done a lot of research actually with water and consciousness, how conscious intention can change the properties of water. And the fact that when you put your intention into water, you can actually store that information and then add that water to, say, cells and tissue culture and produce a biological effect. I've done this, for example, with human lymphocytes grown in tissue culture in my lab, and demonstrated that when healers directly affect these immune cells grown in a petri dish, you can stimulate the growth of these cells. Okay, that's not surprising. Well, maybe it is, but not to me, and probably not to a lot of people in the audience. But the fact that you can do the same experiment and people can focus their intention on the water and then add the water to the petri dish is, to me, quite fascinating. And what's interesting is the fact that the magnitude of the effect is similar, whether it's a direct effect of the healers on the cells or an indirect effect via the water. So that means that the water is storing the information, most of the information, not 100%, a little bit's lost, it goes out into the cosmos, and then we have very similar effects.
So we're storing it not only in water in a petri dish, but also in the water in our own bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
And what effect is that having on us if we can transform our own consciousness so that we don't maybe even have to go to a healer once you begin to sort of change your own view?
Yeah, well, I'm a good example of that because I was doing an experiment one day and the healer didn't show up and everything was all set up, and I said, well, I guess I'll just have to do it myself because I wanted some kind of conscious intention. So I said, okay, I'll just do it myself, and lo and behold, I was able to do do it, maybe not as strong as a powerful healer. Yeah, it's part of the mindset that I've had all along, that as a scientist, like, oh, I need someone who has a special ability to emit energy, like a Qigong master or something, right? But in fact, you know, people can do it themselves.